And so to talk about strict interpretation or living constitution, those are not words I use. And they're not words that I think have much meaning, because what you are doing is interpreting new facts to an established law that in part has been given meaning and precedent, and that in part has a historical background. And you're drawing from all of that toolbox of precedents, history. Some of my colleagues don't rely on history, but others do. And from statutory construction principles. It is not about reading words strictly or about living constitution. It's about giving meaning on the basis of facts that are presented to you.
The Constitution is a living document?
What does that even mean?
Do you see a person? Because I see a person.
What did you put in those brownies?
Calm down, I'm just the Constitution. When you guys learned about the Constitution, you thought of it as just a piece of paper, but it's more than that. It's a living document. Okay, so some people look at the Constitution from what's called a strict constructionist point of view, or originalism. That means that they believe whatever the Founding Fathers wrote down in the Constitution is exactly what our country was intended to be. We should never stray from this, but times change and so do people in society. In order to accommodate for this, we look at the Constitution from what's called a loose constructionist point of view. It allows the interpretation of the Constitution to change with the changing needs of the country. There is still some margin of error in this process. In the eyes of the strict constructionist, the idea that the Constitution is a living document isn't what's best for the country. Some would say that it gives the power to decide when and how the Constitution changes solely to the Supreme Court. In this case, allows those 9 people to make decisions that should be determined by the people as a whole.
I guess that makes sense.
Makes sense. There's an entire person standing in front of us, and we don't know who she is or where she came from, and she's telling us that she's the Constitution. That literally makes no sense.
Well, what are you trying to tell me? That she can't be real?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you.
Well, people say the same thing about Santa, but I still get presents under my tree every year.
When I was born, the country was made up of a singular group of people who had selective interests that reflected what they wanted for themselves. Take Madison's We the People in order to form a more perfect union. Think about it. It was 1788. The we that Madison is referring to was an exclusive club of limited to white male landowners. Today, in the 21st century, the we has been redefined to better reflect all who compose our nation. This is largely due to the process of popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is the principle that the government should be ruled by the people through elected representatives, and that any government action that takes place in the country should be done by the consent of the people. For example, during the Civil War, the 13th Amendment was passed, effectively abolishing the practice of slavery. During this time, Stephen A. Douglas relied heavily on the concept of popular sovereignty in the issue of slavery. He pushed for the state's people to be able to decide by a vote whether it should allow slavery or not. In 1868, the 14th Amendment came along and gave former slave citizenship equal protection under the law. Another 2 years later, black men were given the right to vote with the 15th Amendment, and eventually, in 1920, the 19th Amendment gave the same right to women. Every amendment or Supreme Court decision that's made in this country influences how the issue is viewed in the Constitution, and on how we view the future of our country. The Constitution is always evolving in interpretation, always growing, always changing. So really, I'm just like you two or any other person.
Hey, you're missing the whole lesson.
Sorry, I didn't get enough sleep last night. But I just had the weirdest dream. You never believe it.